So as a lifelong resident of West Palm Beach, I have a vested interest in this community, obviously. Not just to live, work, and play here, but to also make sure that the residents in this city, particularly in the historic Northwest where I'm born and raised in, remain safe and have the sense of safety and comfort when they're able to walk out of their home each and every day. I wanted to make it clear that this press conference today is in no way, shape, or form a reflection of Chief Mooney as a person or as an individual. I personally do not know her, so I'm not speaking to her character as an individual. However, I am speaking to her ability to be effective as a chief of police. So I want to make it clear that there needs to be a declaration of a new policy on how the police department systematically moves forward with addressing the increase in crime, both citywide and particularly in the historic Northwest community. Up to now, Chief Mooney has failed to address the specificities in the community that's been plagued with recent homicides. Due to the nature of the current state of emergency in our Northwest neighborhood, it's apparent that Chief Mooney is unfamiliar with community crisis management and refuses to acknowledge publicly that there's a problem. After sitting this morning in this morning's Mayor Commission workshop, and after hearing the chief publicly state that she's looking to the mayor and the commission for direction, it became even more evident that she's not fit to lead this agency any longer, and that for that in itself, and again, for the reasons that we've been having so many different homicides, particularly in the historic Northwest community, the fact that there has yet to be a plan of action put forward by the chief of police to be directed down to assistant chiefs and to other top brass in the agency, I am requesting that the chief step aside and allow for new direction to come in.
Can I ask why now? The chief has been in her position for a couple years. Why would that be an issue of concern right now?
Well, you know, you often hear about the city of Riviera Beach having such a high crime rate. And I said this to someone the other day. And this year alone, we're only 4 months in the year, soon to be 5. We've had in Riviera Beach 2 murders, and both murders have been solved in the city of Riviera Beach. In less than 40 days, we've had 10 homicides in the city of West Palm Beach, with no leads in some of those cases, and there's been no redirection of resources to combat those hot spots, what I call hot spots, areas where the crime is obviously going on. These murders have all taken place geographically in the same area, which is in the historic Northwest community, from Banyan up to 45th Street, between Dixie and over to Tamarind. So it's not a matter of, well, just because she's been chief for 3 years now, that she should stay. It's a matter of, there comes a point in time, if your leadership is not being effective, and if it's not being proactive and not reactive, then things need to be reassessed and reevaluated. I know they may point today to the fact that they've got this new spot shotter or shotter spot system, however, whatever you call it. That's reactive. You know, you're learning about the areas where shots have occurred after the fact. By the time the PD gets there, it's after the fact, and you can't catch anyone. You can't do any effective policing that needs to be hands-on. I've said it time and time again, and I will continue to stand by being a firm believer in community policing. The biggest issue that this agency has that I foresee is that this agency does not mirror the reflection of the community. What do I mean by that? There's a lack of Black Americans. There's a lack of Hispanic Americans serving in this agency. And I'm sure that my good friend Rick King from the Palm Police Benevolent Association will say, well, you know, it's difficult for us to find qualified and credible candidates to serve the agencies. But the fact of the matter is that we're not doing enough to go out and to seek individuals who would be willing to serve. I've often said that we should be going into areas and neighborhoods like the historic Northwest and recommending and suggesting that these young men and women come and join the police force. And obviously we can't bring folks on that have records, but if you get to them by way of community policing prior to their graduating high school and give them an opportunity to go right into the police academy from high school and come back and serve in the community that they're from, you know, that's a very noble step up. You know, we also have not done any gun buyback programs. There's no reason why these folks in this particular community would not be open to coming and dropping their guns off, no questions asked, and receiving a few dollars back from it. Every little bit helps, but nothing has been brought forth publicly up to now from this particular police chief as to how we can curb and lessen the rate of murders that have been going on in less than 60 days.
Mr. Jackson, when you say that there's been no engagement on behalf of the chief, what do you mean by that? Because we have seen her out there doing like peace walks and talking to people in the community. Do you mean like on a day-to-day, like
Well,
there's no engagement every day?
so let me be clear about peace walks. You know, we see peace walks happen month after month, year after year. We've been seeing peace walks happen across this country in urban communities. And you don't ever see any effective results come from peace walks. So I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, that's nothing but a PR stunt for the police chief and for whomever else is there. Real effective policing, again, it goes back to community policing. Why hasn't this chief taken resources? And let me be clear when I say this. If this was the Western community, if this was happening around Ibis, around Riverwalk, around Andros Isles, if this was happening in the south end of the city, along Olive Drive or along Flagler Drive, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. Why? Because resources would have automatically been redirected instantaneously to ensure that there were more police on the ground, that there were more visible police, to make sure that there were more crime-fighting enhancements and tools and resources being used to combat the crime and to decrease it.
So you're saying the North End has been neglected?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And that comes from the direction of the police chief. When Chief Bush was police chief, crime was down 47% in the city over her 8-year tenure. There's no reason why crime cannot decrease again, but again, it starts with your leadership. That's why they use the phrase, the buck stops here. And I'm sorry, no matter how many times we see Chief Mooney out at a peace walk or walking up and down the street talking to residents, that's not making the residents that I sat with for 4 hours on Saturday night at the double homicide off Australian Avenue down the street from my home, that's not making those folks feel safe. It's not making them feel secure. It's not making them feel they're a part of this community, and it's not making them feel warranted as simple human beings. Every time somebody gets shot and killed in this city, you're having to worry about a mother and a father burying their child. You're having to worry about, in a lot of instances, a father having to be buried by their children who are 5 years of age or younger. You're having to worry about someone not coming home the next day. And granted, I will say this, part of the responsibility does lie in itself on the community itself to begin curbing this situation. So with that, I will say that the community also needs to make it a point to step up and to speak to the PD and to give any information that you have about any of these crimes that have taken place, because that's important. The PD can't solve these crimes without the cooperation of the community. And it also takes the community being willing to understand that we have to do a better job at understanding conflict resolution instead of picking up guns and going and retaliating. However, until that comes into play, because that is a long-term situation I'm discussing, until that comes into play, we have to have a police chief that's leading a police agency that's willing to identify, first acknowledge, and then identify where these hotspots are and why these hotspots are all of a sudden popping up. Because prior to a year ago, or a few years, I'll even say prior to the chief's tenure, you know, crime was low. And you didn't see all of these egregious number of homicides taking place.
The number we had
Was 2015. Yes, and that was exactly, that's why I say prior to the chief's tenure.
Do you think that, what's the feedback that you get from residents in these areas, that they don't see enough visible police presence? Or?
So I often hear that they're scared, that they're frustrated, that they feel that the police are not connecting with them. I had at the double homicide the other night, I had one of the residents approach me and give a complaint about one of the officers about how aggressive the officer was to them. Now, granted, that have been an isolated incident, that may not have been. I'm not sitting here bashing the PD because I'm the first one to stand in favor and in support of law enforcement. Without law enforcement, we're not kept safe. So we need them. However, to your direct question, yes, they're saying that they're not visible. They're saying that they feel like they can't talk to the police. They're saying that they feel like they don't know if the police are actually care about their community and are committed to their community. And again, that's a culture. And that's a culture that derives from the top down. The only way you can change a culture, the only way you can redirect a culture or even create a culture if a culture is missing, is by having effective leadership. And effective leadership has to be willing to identify, first acknowledge, and then identify what the problem is and where the root of the problem is coming from. And so again, I'll say this again, if this was the Western community, if it was the South End, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. We wouldn't be here right now, today, because the problem would be solved and it'd be fixed.
Is there, I know you're calling for the chief to resign. Is there a reason why you're not calling on city officials or the mayor or someone else to?
Well, you know what? Let me be honest with you. I've spoken with Mayor James, and Mayor James, from what I have seen thus far, has been very responsive to these, not only to the crimes, but to the fact that there needs to be a new culture at this agency. And again, that culture starts from the top down. So I have spoken with some of the city commissioners. I would even go as far as to say that Commissioner Peduzzi and Commissioner Riles have also been heavily vested in conversations about how we can fix this situation. And I just sat in the Mayor Commission workshop this morning, and they both gave very viable ideas as to how we can fix this situation immediately, externally, meaning therefore in the community, and internally in the agency by providing more resources and opportunities necessary for the PD to be able to feel like they can go out and do their job. So it's not that I haven't spoken to elected officials here in the city. I have, and you know, I will commend Mayor James for the work that he's done. You know, let me tell you something. I sent Mayor James a text message the other night when I was on that crime scene, and 45 minutes later, Mayor James pulled up. You know, that one thing I can say is he is extremely committed to the well-being of these residents in this city, all residents, regardless of what geographical area they're located in. So, you know, I will say that that the mayor and the commission, for the most part, as far as I can see, are committed. I can't speak for the other commissioners, but I have spoken to Commissioners Nearing, Peduzzi, and Riles, and they are emotionally vested just as much as Mayor James and myself are.
Is it this weekend's shootings that sparked this press conference today?
You know, this has been a build-up over time, but yes, this weekend's double homicide was the icing on the cake for me. I have been, even when I haven't been in town and I've been traveling the country, I have gotten notification after call, after text message about a homicide here, about a shooting there, about a murder there. Just Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m., forget the double homicide, just before that even happened at 4 p.m., there was another shooting right down off of 23rd and Tamron. So, you know, then the fact, to add insult to injury, that we have a double homicide just a few hours later, and now we're looking at less than 60 days, we've got multiple homicides that don't have leads and that nothing has been done. It'd be one thing if the chief came out and publicly acknowledged that we've got a crisis, that we've got a state of emergency in this city, and that she was looking to the mayor to redirect resources so that way she can help combat this issue. If she would have done that, I wouldn't be standing here today. But it's evident that this chief does not have the experience or the wherewithal to be able to combat conflict, not conflict, but crisis management in particular communities and neighborhoods.
Have you done any work? I know this weekend you were out there. Have you done any work with the communities in your end as well?
Absolutely. Let me tell you something. You will, and you can see from my social media. I mean, this is completely independent of the Black Republican Caucus of Florida. That's one entity. But I myself, as a private citizen, Sean Jackson, I am traveling constantly to prisons, working with inmates, working with their children, mentoring their children. Just last Saturday, I sat with over 40 kids out in Moorhaven Correctional Facility while they were there visiting their inmates, their fathers. I sat and I mentored them to help them to understand reasons why they don't want to end up where their fathers are. There are countless community events that have taken place here in this city. Again, I'm born and raised here. I have a vested interest here. I'm always here, whether I'm in town or whether I'm here by way of spirit as sending my remarks. I'm always vested in what's going on in this community, and you can see over the years, I've devoted my entire life to public service. The past 10 years, you will have always seen me in this city fighting and standing for what's right. And I always stand on the side of justice. If you do what's right, righteousness will always lead. And righteousness is godliness. So I'm a firm believer in that, and I stand firm by that. And, you know, again, I've been in this community for a very long time. I've been in the trenches. I was born and raised, born at St. Mary's Medical Center, raised off of Tamarind and 9th Street. So there's a lot of folks that I know. I found out who did that murder, that double homicide. I found out in less than an hour who did it. And I also found out that the person that did it was also involved in another homicide that took place about a month ago off of Broadway when it shut down Broadway between 45th and 39th. So, you know, these folks talk to me. They talk to me because I have relationships with them, because I know them. I know their parents. I know their families. I've known them from being involved in the community and from growing up in the community. So I'm not just, you know, on the scene, you know, at an event, you know, at a ribbon cutting with the mayor and commissioners. I'm actually in these streets when the cameras and the TV crews are not there. I'm with these folks on a daily basis. I know what's going on. I see it. I lived it.
Is there any particular person that you think would be a better police chief?
You know what? I'll reserve judgment on that, or reserve comment on that. I do have someone in mind that I think would be amazing. But you know, out of respect for the mayor, this is his city. It's his responsibility to appoint and bring forth a new police commissioner, a new police chief. So I'll reserve my comment on that. But I do believe that that who is in mind, who comes to my mind, I should say. I think he would be a really good police chief, but again, I'll wait for a later time until after Mayor James has said something on that, and then I'll make a comment on that.